that I would like to make it an interactive discussion, because I know all of you know a lot about Sri Lanka and many of you probably know more than I do on many issues. Equally, I think it would be more interesting to do it that way. So I'm not going to make long remarks. We have gone through a very difficult period last year. I will focus only on the economy in my comments. We are now trying to stabilize the economy. As you know, we have just entered into an IMF program, an EFF facility with the IMF. We are in the process of restructuring our debt, and hopefully by the end of this year, between September and December, we can re-enter the international system, because at the moment we have suspended debt payments. We are limiting and restricting imports. So we are hoping that by the end of the year we will be able to get back to the international system with the support of the IMF. But it's a challenging road. I think we have to be honest to ourselves in that. We have to do a lot of structural reform to our economy. Stabilization is not the only aspect of this economic program. It's also bringing about structural reform so that we can get back to a growth path. Because if you look at it between last year and this year, when this year ends, in the year 2022 and 2023, we would have shrunk, our economy would have shrunk by about 10%. It's a significant shrinkage. So we have to get back to a growth path. According to the projections, 2024 might give us about a 1.5% growth rate if we are able to do what is required. But growth is the key aspect. Now, for that, India becomes a key partner. India was our main partner last year in stabilization. India provided us in different forms and with different instruments nearly $4 billion. And that is what I think kept our economy stable. Although we had social disruption, we did not have violence. And one of the reasons for that was the fact that India was able to provide us that cushion last year. So basically, in the revival too, India would be an important partner. We have to diversify our sources of income when it comes to exports and foreign exchange earnings. So linkages with India, integration with the Indian economy, connectivity with India, all that becomes key for us. And the tourism from India, I just looked at the statistics. Last month, India is again now #1 in tourists coming into Sri Lanka, which is a great, I think, that's a great progress. The Indian economy and ours which have shrunk by 10%, yours which will be growing by 6% hopefully and beyond, that is the way to go for us. Equally, we would like to see, we are looking at trilateral cooperation, that is maybe countries like India and Japan working together in Sri Lanka. In the context of the economic stabilization, India took the lead to talk to Japan, to talk to the IMF, to bring everybody to the table. Last year, I think India provided that leadership so that we could enter this EFF facility now. So that is what the future that we need to work on. But I must stress again, there are many challenges, and it is up to us as Sri Lankans to be resolute and to have the self-confidence to be able to achieve these things. Now, I will end there because by nature journalists are cynics and skeptics, and what I have presented is maybe an optimistic worldview. So I will leave it to you to maybe ask questions, gain criticisms, and we can have hopefully a conversation. Thank you very much again for inviting me.
Thank you, Excellency. Please throw the session open to the question and answer session. So those of you who want to ask questions, kindly raise your hand. A microphone will come and you introduce yourself and ask a question. Smita Sharma.
Hi, Commissioner Smita here. I work independently. Two quick questions. One is there is a confusion about really what is the Chinese proportion of the debt? Because while I was in Sri Lanka, there were a lot of arguments being made that actually the highest sort of, the debt portions would be for Japan instead of China into Sri Lanka. If you could throw some light into the kind of Chinese debts we're talking about. And B, in the backdrop of the crisis when it was triggered following the entire stress on organic farming, the stopping of imports of pesticides, fertilizers, there was a lot of misinformation, if I may speak so, that was also spread in India in particular around organic farming itself. On hindsight, what is the assessment? Was it really about an organic farming crisis, or was it the approach to how it was handled that led to that crisis?
I think probably there is enough on that for a speech, but I will. On the debt, let me just bring that across to you, is that basically the debt under treatment in this context is $30 billion that is to be restructured. And of that, roughly half is to private creditors, and the other half is sovereign debt, including multilaterals. Of the 15 billion sovereign debt, 3 billion is to China. That is the multilateral and sovereign debt, 15 billion, 3 billion is to China. By way of comparison, the Paris Club, which includes Japan, is 2.4 billion. India is 1.6 billion. So that's then the multilateral debtors like the World Bank, ADB is 5.7 billion. So that's this is ballpark, but that's where it is. Of the private creditors, basically we have these international sovereign bonds, which are held largely by investment banks and investors in the West, really in New York and London. That accounts for about $12.1 billion. And then there are Chinese commercial loans, which accounts for about $2.7 billion. So if you want to add 5.7 out of 30 billion is roughly the Chinese, if you take what is called the Chinese private debt also on board. So that's what it looks like. Now, when it comes to the treatment of this debt, as you know, the IMF prepared something called the debt sustainability analysis, which basically worked out how much debt can we afford to sustain and how much can we afford to pay. And now we have to get the creditors to fit into that framework. And the Paris Club, the IMF wanted letters from the sovereign lenders that they would support the debt sustainability analysis, which is the norm for the Paris Club. India actually took the lead and provided a letter saying that they would support that. The Paris Club followed. China provided a letter. They have provided a letter agreeing to the process, but now we have to see how we move forward from there. So a lot of it is ahead of us, but the numbers I'm giving are the public numbers, and those are the numbers under treatment. Your second question, I think we got into difficulty not because of organic farming or anything like that. I think I have been economic reform minister in 2001. The problems that were there then are the problems we are facing today. We have 22 million people in our population. We have nearly 1.5 million people working in the government. So basically population to government employment ratio, we are one of the highest in the world. We have 500,000 people who are earning pensions from the government, which is also paid directly from the budget. We don't have a pension fund. So nearly 2 million people are earning salaries from the government. At one stage, in the last couple of years, if you look at it, over 70% of our government revenue was going to pay for salaries and pensions. So we had only 30% left for everything else. When we hit this crisis, 80% of our revenues were going to pay interest. So you can imagine every year you begin by borrowing for everything else. Once you pay interest and salaries, you have already overshot your revenues by 50%. So this was the crisis really. COVID affected us. It slowed down the economy clearly. Then subsequently, Ukraine affected us. But we were basically at that tipping point. We had reached the point where we had unsustainable debt and we have an unsustainable model, really, a development model. So the challenge today is stabilization plus trying to restructure this model. How do we rationalize the state sector? How do we take the SOEs, our state-owned enterprises, which are losing money, whether it's our national airline or our electricity company or our petroleum corporation? How do we break it up? How do we privatize these entities? How do we create competition? These are the issues, really. Now, I mean, okay, everything else may have added a little bit here or there, but I don't think that was what got us here. So, I mean, that's the answer. On the organic experiment, I think maybe we moved too fast, clearly. It should have been phased in. It was too ambitious, the program, clearly. Now here we are, I recently visited a couple of natural farms in India, which are pilot projects, which are doing very well. I think that's how we should have done it, step by step. So that clearly there is a lesson to be learned there. There is no doubt about it. But the cause of all this was a build-up. It was not something that happened overnight. Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Hi, Sam Siddharth from Beyond. We have the reports of usage of Indian currency, Indian rupee in Sri Lanka. What kind of mechanism is being devised, and when can perhaps an Indian tourist buy stuff in Sri Lanka using Indian currency?
I think at the moment you can exchange Indian currency, and the RuPay card, to use it, there is a sort of a technical link that has to be made. That is being done at the moment. In my hope is in the coming months we should be able to do that. We have to also build up enough Indian rupee capacity on our side to be able to do the trade both ways. So as tourism increases, hopefully we will be able to get that. We are well on the way to that. That is one of our priorities for the economic recovery. Clearly, Indian rupee trade and Indian rupee based tourism is a key element in it. I mean, it has to happen for us to also ensure that we start our growth trajectory.
Nainima.
Nainima from ADP Live. Thank you for doing this, Commissioner. Just wanted to understand what's the status of the Adani projects there, the West Container Terminal and the two wind projects. Are you going ahead with it? Are you happy with the progress? Your thoughts on that?
Very clearly, I mean, Adani Group, the West Terminal is very much on time and on course. I even saw some photographs of it a few days ago. It is a 3 million TEU terminal, and that is a very important investment to us. And at a time like this, it gives us confidence in Sri Lanka that somebody is willing to invest like that. On the wind power also, the negotiations are on. I think the power purchase agreement is being finalized. It's a 500 megawatt wind project, so that is also moving ahead. We are hoping very soon to sign an MOU with India on a cable connection between India and Sri Lanka for power. We understand that off the northwest coast of Sri Lanka, there is nearly 30,000 megawatts of wind energy available. So our whole generation capacity in Sri Lanka is 4,300 megawatts, so we will not need 30,000 megawatts. So if we can get investment going off the northwest coast of Sri Lanka with the wind energy, hopefully we can look after our needs and also look at exports in the future to India. Because broadening and increasing our income lines of revenue lines for Sri Lanka is one of our key priorities, and electricity could be one such area of export of electricity could be one area like that. Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Vandana from the Print. A key part of the IMF-CFF deal was a government diagnostics exercise. And I think Sri Lanka is the first country in Asia to receive that. How does the government plan on tackling corruption, and how do you plan on quantifying it?
Well, I think basically the issue of corruption is not only for Sri Lanka, it's a global issue. And I don't think in the IMF's case, we are the only country at which, I mean, the IMF is approaching us with looking at systems and checks and balances and transparency. And that is something any government would like to have. So basically, for example, there is a central banking act which is coming up to make the central bank independent. So these are institutional checks and balances. Then in order to, there is a parliamentary budget office which is being set up so that the parliament can basically shadow the budgeting process, which is, I think, a very important development as well. And then basically our legal systems have to work. I mean, I having been in politics, having watched this for a long time, when it comes to issues like corruption, I always say if laws can eliminate corruption and if institutions can eliminate corruption, Sri Lanka is paradise. because we have institutions upon institutions for corruption and investigation. We have laws, but finally it's obviously not working. So I think my view, having been Justice Minister actually, I always keep saying, have the institutions that are in existence working. Because what we do is, when the Attorney General's department we feel is not doing their job properly, we go and create a corruption commission. Now, very clearly, we already have a capacity problem of people. So how do you staff a corruption commission? Do you get the best and the brightest there? And then they start working, the Attorney General's department is not allowed to do its work, and then there are clashes. My view is, take the structures and make them work. And reduce, I mean, I am somewhat libertarian in my thinking, because I feel Sri Lanka is so statist, so interventionist, that we need to be a little bit libertarian as well. So that's my answer to your question. I mean, I mean, this is an issue which we have to face and we have to resolve it. Transparency will help. We have one of our success stories is the Right to Information Act, which it is modeled on your act here. And that is a success story. You shine the light somewhere, and then you can see what is going on. And people are using that RTI now, and they're doing a lot of work. Groups, especially non-governmental groups, are using it very effectively. So those are checks and balances from outside. But we need to get the existing institutions working. You create new ones, you try to find people for them, you create enough issues. I didn't try to avoid your question, but that's my outlook on it.
It's on. I can hear you.
Sir, I am from Supreme Court advocate. It is mostly a political process. A political process.
Yes, please.
You repeatedly said India cooperation is very, very important for the development of the Sri Lanka. When Narendra Modi, President of India, went with the investments to the country for development, some of the projects were awarded to the India. That projects went to the Adani. Then there is a political crisis. Political crisis means many opposition leaders criticized about awarding the projects to the Adani. Why? It is a political question. Why?
I will answer it from an economic perspective.
Because
Let me.
people are saying India cooperation,
Yes.
health,
Yes.
everything is more.
Okay. No, I will. If you have finished, or go ahead, please.
Okay.
Yes. No, I will use that example. Now, if you look at the port of Colombo, 80% of the business of the port of Colombo is transshipment business. 80%. Only 20% comes into Sri Lanka. Of that, over 70% of that business goes to India. So we are basically linked to the Indian port network. We have deep water terminals. India doesn't have sufficient deep water terminals. So you have the smaller ships bringing goods into Colombo, and the deep water vessels come in and take them out, and vice versa. That is the business model. Now in, let's say, 15-20 years ago, 15, I think it's 10 years ago also, when Sri Lanka wanted to have a private terminal operator, 10 years ago I would say, and we put out a request for proposals for that, the Sri Lanka government did at the time. Basically, there was only one bid for that, a company called China Merchant from China, CICT from China. India did not have a single port operator company that was in a position to bid for this. Today, Adani is there. He has invested. And 35% of that 70% business I'm talking about going to India, 35% goes to Adani ports in India. So there is a business model. So this is politics. I'm not interested. I'm a politician, but I don't want to get into it. I look at it as investment. There is an Indian investor who is actually willing to put money in as he sees a business potential there. So it had nothing to do with any visits by prime ministers. It's a business, it's an investment decision. So that is the reality of this. I mean, what is happening here, that is not our affair. We are looking at strong investors. And Adani's group has invested in Israel, I mean in Haifa port as well. And so he's one of the most established international port operators. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, I don't want to get into the politics of it. All I can look at it is as a Sri Lankan, an investor, the confidence and the fact that it makes sense. The business model makes sense.
Yes, please.
Hi, Commissioner. I'm Ranjit Kumar. I'm an independent journalist. Chinese are reported to be building a huge port city in Colombo. We have various kinds of reports regarding this port city. What is the nature of this project and what kind of administrative control the Chinese have?
This is basically, there is a commission, which is Port City Commission, which administers it, which is Sri Lanka control. It's a Sri Lankan control, it's a Sri Lankan regulatory authority. By and large, the Port City is a property development project because they fill that area of land and it's a property development project. They are looking at a financial center, they are looking at tourism, they are looking at healthcare properties. It's a property development model. So basically, how successful will it be business-wise? I don't know. They have made an investment, they have filled the land, and they have signed some agreements on the property side. I think it has slowed down a bit because of the crisis and also COVID. What the future is, I don't know. But I don't see anything sinister beyond that. I mean, at least I don't. I mean, that's what you are implying. It's a property investment and the Sri Lankan government has oversight over it. So that's how it is structured. Yes, please.
Yogesh from Sayana. If you see in India, there's a vengeance travel which is happening after COVID. Tourism numbers from here are absolutely hitting the roof. Now, if you look at Sri Lanka, which is a very popular destination, if you could shed some light on some of the new initiatives you're taking, because if you see the growth of other markets of tourists from India traveling to, that growth is much higher than Sri Lanka. And it's a destination which is, close to our heart. There's such a huge cultural engagement as well. If you could just shed some light on, over the next 12 months, some of the initiatives that you and the government there is trying to see that a larger segment comes there.
I mean, tourism is very close to my heart because I was tourism minister some years ago and it was one portfolio I also enjoyed. Basically, we suffered, I think, a double whammy in a way. The Easter bomb attacks had an impact on tourism and that there was a drop. Subsequently, last year's disruption, which all over the world, it was on television, that had an impact. In fact, the recovery from that is slower than what it was after the Easter attacks. After Easter attacks, actually we came back quite quickly. But here it is slower because people have this memory. And India is the market. I mean, we can be another Goa or, that's our goal, that's our dream. And we have to do this marketing at state level. So our tourism ministry is working hard on that. I am, in fact, we have a MOU which I signed at the time I was tourism minister with Gujarat. At that time, Prime Minister Modi was chief minister at the time, with Gujarat on tourism. And the idea of the Ramayana trail, Buddhist trail going into Sri Lanka, Ramayana trail coming out and the other way around as well. Those are some of the products we are trying to market, but we have to do it at state level. And to build the confidence, because people don't want to be hassled. As you say, with revenge tourism, they want to be able to book a flight, get there, get what they're expecting, value for money, and they don't want hassle. They don't want, your driver saying, I don't have petrol, or going to a shop and not being able to buy what you want. So that confidence, it is there in the country now, but that perception is still there. So that perception has to be erased. And what I find is more people who go there, they come back with that impression. We have to also improve connectivity and pricing. We have to make the prices attractive. So we are talking to airlines here. I have had discussions with some of the principals of the airlines here as well, trying to encourage them to increase their frequencies and also to see how prices can be lowered. Try to develop Colombo as a hub for the subcontinent, for Indian carriers. That is something also we are talking about. And what incentives would be required to encourage them. So connectivity and then this confidence, because finally it is a confidence, because as I said, last year was for whatever reason, it had a huge impact on people's minds, and people don't want hassle. So we are trying, but I think you can do your part as well if you can, because finally it is going to be, word of mouth and what we believe in.
Excellency, when you took over, you came up with a beautiful report, very ambitious, which involved inputs from Deluca and others. How much of it have you been able to implement? What are your plans to complete the rest? And what is the government in Sri Lanka doing to get Tamils on board? After the 13th Amendment, there has been a lot of confusion when the Rajapaksas were in power and so on. What is the latest on that? Would you like to tell us? Thanks.
So you ask the difficult questions. The first one, basically the country strategy document, I'll take the easy one first. I think we have achieved quite a lot of it, some of the details, but this is a vision document, and the main trajectory of the document was to move the Indian relationship forward from what was essentially a transactional approach to a strategic approach, and finally to what we call a special relationship. So I think we are somewhere between a transactional and a strategic relationship at the moment. And we are moving in the direction of a strategic relationship, because that's where we should go. Then comes a tougher one, which is a special relationship. And I think the special relationship will happen as we integrate economically, and Sri Lankans and Indians feel comfortable with the people-to-people relationship, economic relationship. And that's why I'm so keen on this integration. Now we are looking at, for example, the electricity cable we spoke about. We are looking at the possibility of an oil pipeline linking Trincomalee with Colombo, with Sri Lanka, with India rather, so that refined multi-product pipeline, that refined oil can be brought in. Because Sri Lanka really does not require its own refinery. If we can work with Indian refineries, it makes a lot of sense. And it's very easy to do that linkage. And someday, why not? Dream that you get on a train in Colombo and get off in Delhi or Chennai. I mean, it's not an impossible dream. I mean, because it's very easy to do it. But integration that way, and integration by air. People ask me, what does a special relationship mean? A special relationship rests completely, in my view, on trust. The ability to trust each other. And for me, the example of that trust is the fact that King Ashoka sent his daughter and son to Sri Lanka with the message of Buddhism. King Ashoka did not know our king, Devanampiyatissa, and I'm still not sure what gave him that confidence to be able to send his two children there. So that is the special relationship. So we had it, we need to get back there. Then I think a lot of these geopolitical issues become non-issues in my view, if we build that. So that's the vision there. On the 13th Amendment, and what you're talking about is the ethnic issue, where I don't want to get stuck into the legal side of it. I think we have to think afresh, because this is an opportunity. A crisis is an opportunity. And I think President Wickremesinghe is trying to do that. This is a time for all communities to talk to each other and to try to come up with some kind of a solution that will be lasting. And I think he is trying to do that. He has started discussions, and we have to think afresh, because I feel all of us have been too involved in this and too immersed in this process for the past 30-40 years, maybe to think afresh. So younger generation also has to be brought into this process, and Mr. Wickremesinghe is trying to do that. I believe all of us must start, whether we are Sinhala, Tamil, Muslim, whatever religion we are, we have to start looking at it afresh. I mean, we are a small island, 22 million people. If we cannot find a way of living together, then we only have ourselves to blame, really. And I think what happened last year, I mean, I don't want to overplay the catalytic impact of what happened last year, because I, for one, don't believe that there is too much virtue in disruption. I mean, in technology, there could be virtue in disruption. You have a Google or a Uber or what have you. But I think, but at the same time, the disruption last year, there is a message to us, especially to our generation that we have messed up. So I think that signal has been taken as well. So I'm not going to get into the debate on devolution, what level of devolution, what is, but I think we've been doing it for nearly 35. I mean, you've been covering it, you know it better than I do. We have to think afresh, and this is a chance. Because when our economy crashed, we have to all get up together. The impact is right across the country. It is not only in the north, south, east or west. And now we are starting afresh. Let us start this afresh as well. I think that is Mr. Wickramasinghe's message. And let us see what he is able to achieve. Let's give him a chance.
Your Excellency, I have a response.
Yes, please.
Do you think there is something called a China factor that determines the contour of Indo-Sri Lankan relations?
I feel the Indo-Sri Lanka relationship is too important to be measured by a third party, through a third party. I think that is also a mistake, because basically our linkage, I think Minister of External Affairs put it very well at one point. He said blood is thicker than water. Somebody asked him, why is it that you helped Sri Lanka at that time? And his comment was very pithy, blood is thicker than water. We are genetically linked, we are civilizationally linked, and we are neighbors. So I don't think we should be measuring it against China in this century and the US, as you know, in the last century. I mean, you have covered us right through. It has to be measured with each other. So if we have issues, when we do, obviously we discuss it. And I think that's what we managed to do in the last couple of years. Transparently to discuss it and to work our way through these issues. And I think we managed. We will have, I mean, as I always say, I mean, I keep quoting Donald Rumsfeld when he says there are known unknowns, unknown unknowns, and known unknowns, what have you, and known knowns, I think. So there are always unknown unknowns that will come up, as we had an experience last year. There will be known unknowns, but we have to prepare for these things. So that's my answer, because I don't like to measure this relationship with others, because then we get, I think, distracted.
Yes, please. I'd like to ask more specifically about the relationship with China. Obviously, the negotiations and the debt because obviously Beijing has interests that are beyond the financial in the Indian Ocean. We had a spy-ship or research vessel visit as it was here, which alarmed the day to some extent. Is there now a feeling in Colombo that perhaps Sri Lanka engaged too far with Beijing and became too involved? And is there any regret over that?
I don't think anybody is judging it that way, one way or the other. I mean, as far as we are concerned, the relationship with India is a relationship with India. And if there are concerns...
I'm asking about the relationship with China.
I think we have, generally there is no view on that. I mean, there is no debate on it, if that's what you're asking. I mean, we measure the relationship with India as being important. That's how we look at it. Because in the geopolitical world, I mean, we are not players really. This is geopolitics, it's geoeconomics. Tracking, if you look at it, I would look at this tracking vessel today is a world of dual technologies, dual purpose technologies. So a tracking vessel can be used to, when we track weather satellites, it can be used for more sinister purposes. Now, it's not to us, I mean, we don't have the capacity to judge that. So in a conversation in the strategic field, we form a view and then we have to take action on that. Because, I mean, we are not, somebody defined countries like ours as being strategically constrained, because we are not able to, we are not players in it. We are strategically located, we are independent, we are proud of our independence and sovereignty. But when it comes to defense issues and security issues, we work with India. That's the reality of it. So when it comes to China, I don't think that factor comes in for us, because we are basically located just south of India, and that's the reality of it.
While you have a question?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
I think I'll continue with this Excellency, the question of the geopolitical importance of Sri Lanka. I've made it quite interest for the big powers games. And with the debt you have faced and with the international funds coming on, so there maybe you're finding yourself in a very delicate situation to balance relation with India, with China, with the United States, especially if we look at the rising tension in the Indo-Pacific Ocean. How Sri Lanka see its position as a sovereign independent state among the conflict or the forthcoming conflict in the Asia Pacific. Thank you.
I think basically throughout history we have had to deal with that. I mean, because our location, whether it was in the more recent history, whether it was the Portuguese, Dutch or the British, they came to Sri Lanka because of our location. And our kings at the time had to manage it in their own way, sometimes successfully, sometimes with difficulty. So I don't think balancing in a way is the right word, although we all use that. I would say we have to find an equilibrium, because if we keep on trying to balance it, we will end up being nowhere. So I think on the security issues, we have to understand our location, and we have to work with India on the security issues. When it comes to the economic aspects, when it comes to investment, we work with everybody. That's the reality of it, because we believe we are a gateway to the South Asian subcontinent. We trade with everybody. So we do that. But where geoeconomics and geopolitics cross, we have to be sensitive. And that is, we have to be always aware and be prepared to understand and adjust. And today the issues become more and more, because with technology, as you pointed out, with the tracking vessel, and technology is much more complex, and it will become more difficult. And we need to be equipped to do that. We need to be able to make our own assessments as to what is right and wrong for us and for the region, and also have good dialogue with India on what needs to be done. I don't think there is a simple solution for this. I mean, during the Cold War period, we had one set of challenges to deal with, and we have lessons to be learned from that ourselves as a country. And I think history offers us a lot. I think Winston Churchill once said that when he was asked, how do you handle complex, I know Churchill is not a popular person to quote these days, but when he was asked by a scholar, I think, what is the secret when it comes to statecraft, he said, study history, study history, study history. In history lies all the secrets of statecraft. And that is true. Even our relationship between Sri Lanka and India, it goes back to the Ramayana. So from Ramayana to now, we have a long history to learn from. But we must not be captured by history either. We have to look forward. I mean, if we become a captive of history, that's not helpful either. But I mean, that's my answer.
Yes, please.
I think this is Manas, Wikipedia.
Yes, sorry, I missed that.
So you mentioned that India was a key partner when your country was getting under massive economic stress last year. And you also said that you're looking towards India's support as a key partner in their economic revival and economic growth. You have been having a series of talks with your finance minister, foreign affairs minister, and NSA over the last few months. So what kind of specific, economic support that you're looking for revival of your economy, Sri Lanka's economy going forward, apart from the steady flow of tourists from India? Thank you.
I think some of what I mentioned, I mean, the electricity cable, the oil connection, making Trincomalee into an energy hub, then ports, investments are what we are looking for now, and especially to try to broaden our streams of income. Because if you look at it, since independence to today, 75 years, 30 years we were fighting a war. I mean, that was basically economically a lost 30 years for us in many ways. And that was also the peak of our demographic dividend, because now we are in an aging society in Sri Lanka. Our youth were at their peak when they were in the battlefield, regardless of Sinhala, Tamil, Muslim, they were in the battlefield at the peak. So we lost 30 years. Out of 75, we lost 30 years. Then in the more recent past, some of these incidents also made us lose the time. And as a result, what has happened when the British left us, tea, rubber were our main industries. tea exports. Since that, all we have added on is apparel exports, which again was as a result of the Americans had the quota system and we started producing for that. Then remittances from migrants in the Middle East and elsewhere. Some of them, of course, people who left Sri Lanka because of the war. And tourism. That's all that we've really added. We have not diversified our economy very much. Tourism is only now, I mean, it's coming up. IT is coming up. So when you look at it, if we look at it as revenue earning, we at the peak, let's say, we get about $7.5 billion from remittances, Middle East and elsewhere. We get about $5 billion from apparel. Tourism, we have got close to like 3 billion. It keeps dropping back and forth. We need to get, that's the one with the potential. Tea is still below $2 billion. Tea is about $1.8 billion. I see recently information technology has just gone over $1 billion. So that's what we have, over $1 billion, and that's not a diversified economy. We can't, afford that. So diversification of the economy is the key, and tagging it with India is the way to do it. I mean, you are a $5.5 trillion economy, we are an $80 billion economy. You are nearly, 1.4 billion, 1.5 billion, our population, we are 22 million. As I gave you the figure of 4,300 megawatt electricity capacity, one power plant here generates 4,500 megawatts of electricity, whereas that's our whole requirement. So when you talk even of the strategic aspect, integration and connectivity is the way out for us. And with it, automatically, I think everything else becomes irrelevant. But Delhi and Colombo must align to do that, and part of my role is to try to achieve it if we can. But that's what I talk about mostly, what I'm telling you. I mean, and I have had good response from your leadership, and access and support has been always there for us, and understanding also the need to achieve this. But of course, India is big. I've been talking to your business community, some of your business leaders personally. I mean, Sri Lanka is too small for many of them. That's why we are happy when somebody actually decides to invest, because that can hopefully create its own dynamic.
Yes,
And
Smita?
just a follow-up question, Smita again. Your local elections have been postponed indefinitely now, citing lack of funds. Are there worries that if the elections, the schedules are all delayed, because given the lack of trust that we have seen between civil society and most of the leadership, including Mr. Vikramasinghe, that this could actually become a problem as well?
Well, I think next year there will be an election, because naturally the presidential election will come sometime towards the third quarter of next year, or the latter part of next year. The local council elections and the provincial elections, for various reasons, were postponed. I think the crisis, I mean, my problem is this, and what you are saying is right. I mean, we have to find a balance, very clearly. I think when the economic crisis struck, the priority was to try to get the economy right. And I think that is happening. Now, whether we can sustain it, whether some of the tough decisions we have to take vis-a-vis the economy, because many of our difficult decisions are ahead of us, whether it can be sustained, whether our people will accept it, whether you need some kind of democratic plebiscite ahead, one can debate that. And I think the process, I mean, we have a democratic process, we have courts. Courts will determine whether these elections, because you can petition courts if there is a feeling that elections have been delayed or done in an untoward manner. See, my feeling is that the government's focus is to stabilize the economy and to try to bring stability to society. Civil society groups have views. There is like you here, we are a vibrant democracy. We are a polarized country, very polarized. So, I mean, the divisions are right across the board. But I think finally next year there will be an opportunity for people to make a decision, probably in a national election. But till then, this will go on, and if people have issues, they will petition the courts, because I mean, our courts have been independent. I mean, some few years back, the Supreme Court actually sacked the cabinet and the Prime Minister at the time. So our court system has always been quite independent. So I mean, it's a valid question, and it's a debate that is going on. I mean, if I speak to 5 Sri Lankans, there are 5 different opinions on what you just mentioned. I mean, I have maybe a slightly more conservative view about this. I feel on one side, the fact that, as I mentioned, I use the word virtue because every disruption, if we look for virtue in it, there is a danger. But equally, each disruption has a message, which we have to pick up. So at a certain point, there will have to be an election. There is no question about it.
Esteemed sir, this is the Rostov Timer.
I'm missing you. Sorry, you are there. Okay, yeah, got it.
Should I continue?
Please. No, I couldn't see you there. I did.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Thank you so much. I am a freelance journalist, and maybe this question of mine might not be a cup of tea. A couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks or months ago, we saw total anarchy in Sri Lanka, lovely island, Colombo, nothing. I mean, wonderful place, and we do not know what was the reason. People entered the king's, president's house. All these things happened. That was a very wanting and horrible thing. And somehow or the other, fortunately, it was controlled. But I am told that there are still ripples of disturbance which are not reported to the press. Now, what is the latest situation? We wish, absolute peace in Sri Lanka. Was it the price rise like in petrol, other commodities?
I think it was a mix of issues. What finally triggered it probably was scarcities, because we are a middle income, or we were, and I hope we can still hold on to it to some extent, a lower middle income country. And there were certain expectations of the state. The compact between the government and the people were that we will ensure that supplies are there. And when petrol, fuel, when foodstuffs, gas, because in urban areas especially, were scarce, there was tension. Equally, I think what you pointed out about the fertilizer issue, I mean that had certain problems in the rural areas. So that is what triggered it. But I think we have to look beyond that in a way. I mean, as a politician, when I first contested an election in 2001, I was a relatively young person then. I was also contesting against the system, saying the system must change. Because our electoral system, I don't want to get into that conversation, but it has to change. There is no question about it. So there is resentment of that underneath as well. That's why I'm saying you can't throw the baby and the bathwater here out. I mean, but equally, I don't believe that at the moment, my view, the priority is to get the economy right and then go to the people and see what the people have to say about it. But what you are saying, the undercurrents, like in any democracy, there are. I mean, there are differences of view. Our society is highly polarized. If it wasn't, we wouldn't be going through all these issues. So therefore, the economy is sensitive, and if there are issues with the economy, there will be social implications. There is no question about it. And especially going into a very tough program, an IMF program of this nature, I don't think many countries have had to go through this kind of IMF program. It will be very, very difficult. There will be social pressure, because basically the middle classes have become poor, the poor have become destitute. I mean, that's what is happening. So clearly. That's why, I mean, leadership has to be sympathetic, empathetic also. There needs to be empathy from leaders, and hopefully some degree of social solidarity. I mean, that is a problem in our kind of democracy where everything is polarized, because opposition feels that if they come into office, they can do better. And frankly, I mean, I have no horse in this race. I mean, I'm commenting it from where I am. I mean, I would prefer to see people working together. But it doesn't happen. I don't think it happens. So, but there is always, it's not an easy situation at the moment. There is no question about it. But will there be a violent explosion? I mean, I can't say anything of that. But if you are talking from a tourism point of view, we have had a history of violence in Sri Lanka, but tourists have never got affected by violence. So Sri Lankans tend to sort out their problems, I think, among themselves. So,
Cricket also.
Yes, sir. Cricket also goes up and down. That's true. Yes, sir. I have my Deputy High Commissioner who is a cricketer. He will comment more on that, I think.